My name is Dr. Walters, and I am the chair of the Scientific Review Committee. The job of our committee is to make sure that all student researchers are conducting their research safely and also that their research subjects are treated correctly and safely. We also review all of the forms that are required by ISEF, the International Science and Engineering Fair, to make sure that all the correct paperwork and procedures have been followed. The purpose of this video is to show you the forms that are required for all projects and to talk about special situations. I will have a separate video that describes the forms required for those special situations. You can get these forms from the ISEF website, or when you go to the STEM Wizard website and start filling out information about your project, you'll go through a checklist that will also help you figure out which forms you need. So all projects require 4 forms. The first one is this adult sponsor checklist, Form 1. The second one is the student checklist, Form 1A. And you only need one of these per project. If you have multiple students, you can list the student or team leader here and the other team members there. The third thing that every project needs is a research plan and project summary. And this third page here provides the instructions for how to do that. This comes with the ISEF forms that you'll get. So make sure you follow these instructions and include this information. And the fourth thing that all projects require is Form 1B, which is the approval form. In this case, this form is required for each student. So if you have multiple team members, you need to submit multiple forms for each student. Everybody has to fill out this first part, Part 1. Part 2 only needs to be filled out if you have one of the special situations that I'll talk about next, which are those that involve humans, vertebrates, or potentially hazardous biological agents. And then Part 3 we'll fill out at the science fair, so you don't need to do Part 3 right now. When you fill out the adult sponsor checklist, and the adult sponsor is typically the teacher or a parent, it will help you figure out what additional forms you need. So those 4 forms I just showed you are here, which are all of the ones that we just went through that are required for everybody. There are some additional forms that you might need, which are 1C if you're doing your research at an industrial setting, such as a research lab, and Form 7 if your project is a continuation of a previous project. So you might need those, but they're not super common for our science fair. In addition, if you're working with any kind of hazardous chemicals, activities, or devices, you need to fill out the risk assessment form, or Form 3. This would be anything that the student would not normally encounter in their everyday lives. This is common for chemistry projects, for example, because you're using chemicals that you don't encounter in your everyday life. If you're not sure whether or not you need a risk assessment form, it's always better to fill one out than not, because that way we just make sure that everybody is staying safe. You also may need a Form 2 if it's decided in your risk assessment that you need a special supervisor, but that is not as common as just needing the risk assessment form. Then there are 3 special situations, which when you fill out this checklist, it refers to up here. These are the special things that you would need if you have any of these things. Humans, vertebrate animals, or potentially hazardous biological agents, which include microorganisms, recombinant DNA, and tissues. In those cases, additional forms and pre-approval is required. Human projects include any project where the student is interacting with anyone else besides the adult sponsor or the teacher. This includes things where the student is directly, doing something to a human, like having them taste something or listen to something, but it also includes surveys, including online surveys. So if you conduct any kind of a survey, you must fill out the additional human participants form and get pre-approval. It also includes projects where the student designs something like an engineering project and has another human test it. If you're having anyone test out a project or prototype that you designed, again, it's considered a human project and you must fill out Form 4 and do the additional pre-approval steps. This is the most common reason for student paperwork to be incomplete, is they did not complete Form 4 before they started experimenting. So again, make sure if you involve any other humans in any way, you do the human participants Form 4, and you do it before your project. The next special category is vertebrate animals. Vertebrate animals include mammals, birds, reptiles, amphibians, and fish. We advise you not to do research on vertebrate animals for this particular science fair because the ISEF rules are extremely strict and restrictive. So it is difficult to meet the rules if you want to work with vertebrate animals. However, if you really cannot find an alternative to working with vertebrates and you really want to do that, this requires special pre-approval from the scientific review committee, not just from your school, but from me. So if you want to work with vertebrates, you need to contact me before you start so we can make sure your project follows the ISEF rules and won't get disqualified by ISEF. Finally, any potentially hazardous biological agents also requires pre-approval. And this would include, as I mentioned above, any kind of microorganisms, anything with recombinant DNA, anything with tissue samples such as blood or saliva, anything with cell cultures. These also require prior approval. And so again, if you're thinking of doing anything like that, make sure you contact us right away so we can make sure you're following all the correct ISEF rules. So for these 3 special situations, I have recorded a separate video with information about the paperwork and requirements that are needed. So make sure you watch that video if any of these things apply to you. For everyone, make sure you have the 4 main forms that are required, and also that so these 4 forms, and also that you think about whether or not you need Form 3, which is the risk assessment form, if you're doing anything that might potentially be hazardous.